My name is Matthias Neumann. I'm the artist of Basics number 39. I'm originally from Germany, moved to New York about 20 years ago, where I practice architecture as well as primarily public art these days. But I've always had this dual practice of art and architecture. It's a temporary public artwork, right, as the whole exhibition is. So what I would like for people to have an idea of, or think of really, what does it mean to temporarily place artwork in a public setting? The whole work is part of a series of works. Basics number 39 is the 39th iteration of that work. Each work is very different, but they're all conceived as temporary public artwork. So the temporality of it, as well as the public setting of it, is important. And they're all constructed out of 2x4s. So what I do want somebody to take away from it, hopefully, is finding a strange construction in the middle of the meadow, and thinking about the materiality, the spatiality, connection between the work and the setting, meaning the beautiful surrounding. It's a very rectangular form in one way, so there's a contrast to the trees around it, but it also blends at the same time because it is constructed out of raw 2x4 wood, right? So it has actually a connection with the land without trying to imitate the land. I've been working on this ongoing series Basics for the past 5 years. As with many things, you discover as you kind of like dive in further. So over the last 5 years, over the last 30, this is number 39, so the 38 previous installations were all in public settings. They try to do 3 things for the most part. A, they try to respond in one way or another to the site. This piece is, for instance, raised up 4 feet because the grass, the meadow, is actually growing up to 3 feet. So the main shift in perspective as you kind of walk around it is kind of like as you go from here into the woods. So there's a responsiveness to that. The second part, almost all pieces, not all of them, but almost all pieces are somehow spatial in one way or another. This one, obviously, because it's 4 feet up, people won't be crawling in, but if it, you know, most pieces are kind of like sitting on the ground. So you're not quite sure as an audience, am I allowed to, you know, like, am I supposed to just look at it? That's what you do with sculpture, right? Or am I allowed to actually do I have agency? And that's kind of the public part to me, where, you know, when we talk about temporary public artwork, the public aspect is, you know, what is actually public space, right? How much do I, as the artist, kind of like let go and kind of like give out of the hand and kind of like put it onto somebody else's plate to decide to either go in or not, or just look at it, or I always like to observe that children, for instance, they don't ask the question, am I allowed to touch or am I allowed to crawl in? They just occupy it. Adults very mostly go at these pieces kind of like, some of these pieces are kind of like, they're proportioned that you could sit in it, for instance, but they're also formally so strong that that you know it's an artwork. We all learned we're not supposed to touch the artwork. So there is this kind of like insecurity. And typically I like to leave it up to people. Like, I'm not telling you, well, yes, you can sit in there, or no, you cannot touch it. No, that's the public aspect of the work. And the 2x4s, you know, the materiality helps to somehow cross that threshold or make that a little bit, like, yeah, to make it less precious in terms of interacting with the piece. First, on a formal level, right? Because it does clearly something that wants to start a dialogue with what's around it. But in regards to Earth Day, there's a few aspects to the work. It's there for a while. It's going to be here It will age, not only is it temporary in regards to that it's only there for a period of time, but it will also mark the time. Like right now, as it was just installed, it's very yellowish, it's very bright. Over time, it will get grayer. It will kind of like, it will change over time, over this period of time that it's installed. So if somebody comes here, like every day, there will actually be also a marking of time through the piece. In that respect, it has kind of, on a small scale, but I think on a significant scale, it does talk about change. And I think that kind of like harks back to Earth Day in one way. On a more material level, the work, as I said, is all 2x4 construction lumber. After the work is going to be de-installed, I usually try to recycle it back into the, into the construction industry, like that somebody uses it for building, because it's totally usable thereafter. It's been out here for a period of time. It's going to be a little bit grayer, but it's still going to be perfectly fine for construction. So in that respect, all the material that you see there is basically the way I like to think of. It's kind of like borrowed from the construction cycle, right? In that respect, I also think that that has some resonance with Earth Day, where you actually use something that is kind of going through, in that respect, in this case, kind of like the building industry, but it could be all kinds of things where you kind of like divert the use for a while, and then it goes back to what it's being made for, right? So there's basically zero waste.